and Sam go.
Well, thank you very much, Richard. That was a really, really, really nice performance there. Very relaxing performance. So thank you very much for that. Again, thank you to everyone who's been watching, everyone who liked the video as well. Yeah, today we are going to be talking a bit about improvisation. So what Richard then was playing tonight was a completely improvised performance. I think what Richard does is he'll go for a particular style, a particular genre, and he'll then improvise the rest of the performance around it. So we're going to be asking Richard in a second all about improvisation, how it affects his music, how it helps him write, how it helps him create. We're also going to be talking to Stephanie Liney, who is a harpist. And I think it's fair to say that Stephanie might have some different views on improvisation. So we're hoping to get an interesting balance between the two. So yeah, we'll be speaking to them both very, very shortly. The inspiration for the chat about improvisation was based on an article which came out recently, which was talking about there was a piano scholar called John Mortensen, who was claiming that improvisation is a skill that has been lost over the years, and that actually back when Bach or Beethoven and Mozart were famous, that these were actually that improvisation was a core part of who they were as musicians. And yeah, so we're going to be exploring that idea that improvisation has been lost, and perhaps thinking about why that has been, and what musicians are doing today as well. So yeah, I'm brilliant. So I'm gonna hand over to Richard and Stephanie, who have joined me now. So Richard, thank you first of all for that brilliant performance. How was that for you? How did you enjoy that?
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, it was really, really, really good actually. Really enjoyed that. I haven't played the real piano in inverted commas for quite a while, so it was good to kind of get back into it really, because I've been quite often using the electronic piano, which you know, kind of like you need to use at the moment, because obviously we're doing lots of live streaming. But now it's really nice to sort of get back and play the original piano and to kind of get the feel of the keys again. I kind of sort of got inspired a little bit last night, reading the article that you talked about the improvisation, and thinking, do you know what? I just fancy sort of giving it a bit of a bash.
Yeah, let's talk about that article, because it says, I'll read the opening paragraph, which says, Bach, Mozart, Beethoven all thrilled audiences with their spontaneous improvisations, but today's classical pianists have lost the art, according to a music scholar who argues that performances suffer because they are so dependent on the printed score. Yeah, I was wondering what your opinion of that was, Richard.
I think it really resonates with me actually, because when you look at things like I know like the Moonlight Sonata is one of the ones that is held up as the epitome of this. It's like the beginning of the Moonlight Sonata is so well known that the people like Liszt, for example, Franz Liszt, would play the beginning of the Moonlight Sonata and get halfway through and then do this crazy improvisation that would kind of take off and go off on a complete one, then come back. And it's all about kind of like entertaining and using it to kind of express yourself, for me, and to entertain people and bring people into your world. And I feel like we kind of get a little bit stuck with this. And I had a big discussion with Stephanie this morning about this, because Stephanie has a little bit of a different point of view on this. We're kind of like similar, but she comes from a different point of view, because obviously I do slightly more performing, I think it's fair to say, isn't it? Like in terms on the piano, especially, and you do more teaching than I do. So you're quite often um, teaching people and bringing them through, and that you kind of need that structure. And then I tend to not have enough time quite often to be able to prepare everything, and then those are the moments where you just have to kind of sit down and play, I think. So that's kind of how I see it.
Well, I'll come back to you on that idea of sort of the whether you would ideally be an improvisationist, or whether it's more of you're kind of having to work with the conditions and the context in which you are a musician. But first, yeah, Stephanie, can I ask you what your viewpoint on improvisation is, and say the role of it within music in comparison to learning printed scores? And
a lot of the composers, as they start, so I can hear myself.
It's really off-putting, isn't it?
It's really off-putting. A lot of the composers has learnt by playing other people's music, and by learning other people's music, you can then go on from that and create your own music and improvise off that. So, but when I start really little kids up on the piano or the harp, I get them to create their own music. So, and it might be something like a cat is chasing a squirrel up the tree. So we'll explore the sounds on the piano, and it literally does sound like a cat that's hitting the piano keys. But the kids are enjoying it, and they're exploring rhythm, and they're creating their own music. And the thing is, they can't be wrong. So you're instilling that freedom in them, because with the written music, like, I think it's really important, but at the same time, it's so rigid, and some kids really struggle with it. And you've got this exam sort of thing. They want to do exams. I don't push them to do exams. They ask me if they want to do the exams, and they go. And sometimes it's really hard to get them to learn those three pieces, because they struggle with reading so much. But actually, if you gave them a little theme and you explain music theory and chords, they could improvise around it. Everyone's slightly different. So some people find it easier to improvise, and some people find it easier to play what's written. It depends on the individual.
Yeah, so Richard, back to you then. I'm interested in to know, as a musician, what your sort of, why you would tend a bit more towards improvisations than, say, some more printed music. What's your personal preference? Why do you have your personal preference?
Yeah, do you know, I don't know if it's even a preference, Sam. I think part of me, I have a natural inbuilt curiosity. I was thinking about this last night. I was lying there in bed thinking about these kind of things, and I was thinking, what I really like, I like pushing things forwards, and I want to find the next thing, and I want to find out. It's part of it is for me. So part of it is like, I want to find another melody, or I want to find something else that's going on, or explore the piano a little bit. A bit like tonight. I looked at it and I thought, you know what, I've got those microphones there, and I know there's quite a lot of echo on it that I can put on. I can put some extra delay on, and I wonder what happens if I just pluck the strings. And it obviously was probably, to anybody watching, what may have been a bit weird, but I thought, oh, that's quite cool. And I always want to find out what would be over the next hill, and that's probably part of my problem, really. I kind of I want to see what's there, and so for me that kind of really excites me and keeps me going, I think. So that's what I like about the improvisation, because I feel like you're discovering what you can do, and what the possibilities are, and where you might go. But then there is the kind of practical element to it as well. And I think, coming back to the article that you read, I think it was in The Guardian over the weekend. And the bit that resonates with me is the bit where he says that's what there's a bit. It's not. There's no difference between performers and composers. Back in the day, they weren't composing; they were performing and simply writing down what they were performing. And I kind of think that's a bit the same because, okay, if you ignore the fact we had printed music, if you sat down, you went and played the piano, or you played the guitar, or the harp even, you've got to have some music to start with. So the natural start is to sit down and explore and find out what sounds nice. And then you go, oh, that sounds pretty good. Let's write that down. And then you kind of explore a bit more and you think, oh, that sounds better than that did. And you end up with these melodies and maybe they stick and you start to write down. And then other people go, oh, that's really nice. I like that. And they start to then go, oh, we'll have a bit of that. And it kind of builds up, I think. And so I feel for me, it's kind of like a bit of a natural progression. And there's something about, so I don't really think of it as improvising. I think of it as just playing, if I'm honest. I don't really feel like tonight what I did was improvising. I feel like I just simply sat down and did what I might do any Monday evening, which was just simply play the piano. And I feel like with there can be, and this is where I think I sympathise with the article, is that there's this pressure all the time to perform other people's music, and I feel like sometimes I just want to play for me. So that's what that was tonight. That wasn't thinking, oh, I've got to do it for other people. That was, it'd be great if other people came into my world and enjoyed the moment with me. But really what I guess we're asking people to do on the live stream tonight was to kind of just join me in that moment, really, and explore for 20 minutes what might be possible with just a piano.
Yeah, I guess it's because when you're improvising, essentially you're practicing the part of yourself which is being creative and bouncing off your own melodies, and yeah, I do wonder. So yeah, for me, it seems to build that muscle in terms of being a writer or a creator of songs or performances. Yeah, I was wondering, Stephanie, if maybe you could talk about how, yeah, for you personally, do you see yourself as a musician as someone who uses improvisation to kind of yeah, do you think the importance of your performances is to sort of transfer, say, a lineage of music that's already about, or is the focus to present new music, and therefore would improvisation sort of play a part in that?
So my favorite music is the really early music, and one of the beautiful things about that is that we have absolutely no idea what it sounded like. So so one of the beauties of that is that you can make it your own. There aren't any rules. We don't know what the musical rules in the medieval era were. We know a bit about Renaissance music, we know about Baroque rules and things, but that early stuff, but even so in the Renaissance, we don't know what Henry VIII listened to. We have absolutely no idea how it sounded when they performed it. Which gives you this freedom to play. So technically you're playing from the written notes, but it's not in, like, say you play Chopin on the piano, there's this prescribed style that you have to play Chopin in that way, otherwise it doesn't sound like Chopin. And the same with Beethoven's, you've got to play that in a certain way. Mozart's got to be played in a certain way. Shostakovich has got to be played in a certain way. But with that really early stuff, you can have fun with it. And some of my favorite early music groups, they do all sorts of weird and wacky stuff. They, like one group, they've got this a full Baroque ensemble and they play all this early music and then they bring a saxophone in. And it sounds it sounds amazing. So there's this saxophone doing like sort of Baroque, might be doing like a Baroque improvisation over the top. And obviously they didn't have saxophones back there. And it's that freedom. So, and I've read various like books on medieval music and Renaissance music. And one of the things that I did find, and they think that with the harp especially, it was improvised. A lot of it was improvised, and you sang or said poetry over the top. And you had different things depending on different moods. And so and also the harpsichord, because I studied the harpsichord at uni. When you do the early like tuning systems, you can feel like you can improvise more around some of the pieces because it's not equal temperament. So some of those notes really, they speak, like the intervals. Some of them are such scary, dark intervals that you can have real fun with it. And some of the composers did. They're all, yeah, it's quite interesting to look at it that way. And from a newer point of view, you can improvise on your own stuff. You know, there's no rules.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. That, I don't know, for me there seems to be, you've got one side of music today which is very much all about the next thing and pumping out new music as quickly as possible, and then you have, say, more classical stuff which seems to be a lot more conservative and about preserving certain things. It's interesting to know how different scales and different instruments allow itself for different forms of improvisation. I know Richard say you use a lot more, say, modern instruments. I wondered if they maybe lend themselves a bit more to improvisation, or if it's in fact maybe easier to improvise on, say, a harp or a piano.
I think I think I come back to this article which I'm banging on about. I think it comes back to the fact that it's like, for me, the improvisation thing is, once you've mastered your kind of not even basics, kind of like you're pretty proficient in your instrument, you can then take it on and express yourself and use the instrument. So, for example, I bought a keyboard over. Well, actually, I bought it today, and it's going to come tomorrow. I'm quite excited about this. This is a little keyboard that we can hopefully take out and do some live streaming outside with. But it's got the ability to knock out notes. So you can say in a scale, it might be in the scale of C major, and it will only let you play the notes that go with that scale. Now, I was thinking about this, and part of me thinks, well, that's a bit cheating. Part of me thinks that's really handy, because if you're like, if we're going, live on, I don't know, some live TV broadcast or something, you don't really want to play the wrong notes. So that could be quite useful. And the other part of me thought, well, do you know what? If you need to know that you're in the scale of B major, or if you're in D flat minor or something, do you know what? To be able to know that you're in that scale, I think you've probably got every right to then say, right, I'm going to choose to only let the keyboard do that. Because, I mean, if you know what temperament is and you've kind of understood how the instrument works, you can then be above it. So I don't see it as cheating at all, actually. I came to the conclusion that actually I felt like it deserved to be able to use that function.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's interesting for me, because I'm I guess a layman in terms of music, but I guess for me, like, I look at jazz and I would see that seems to be the area for me where there is a lot of improvisation, and where things do go beyond scales, and kind of they'll put their foot in that other world, and maybe something will then build around that to the point where you could possibly even change key. Or Stephanie, do you ever play around with different going sort of outside of scales? And is that a common thing in music?
Yeah, if Richard sets my harp up in a strange way.
Okay.
Because the harp, actually, the keyboard that Richard's ordered, my harp, I can either set the levers or I can set the pedals to whatever scale I want, which does actually make improvising in one key very, very easy. You can still play the wrong notes, though. It can still sound wrong.
Well, I feel like we could probably talk about this for a long time. I'm especially interested in it in terms of how you teach yourself music, because I think there's, on one end, you can discipline yourself and put yourself into lots of other traditions, and I think you learn through that. But at the same time, if you're wanting to sort of develop your voice as an artist, it's important that you play around with those different traditions, and then come up with your own sort of phrasings and riffs from that, which is I think seems to be the improvisation part of it. But then there's, do you do that in practice, and do you do that in front of a live audience? And I don't know. I feel there's a lot to talk about there. But I don't know, Richard, do you have any final comments about that? Maybe.
I think my only comment would be, I think for me it takes quite a lot to stand up and to play something that might be a little bit out of your comfort zone in front of people, and I would encourage people to do that. And I'd also I kind of like encourage anybody, whatever like ability that they are, and I think Stephanie would echo me on this, is like just go for it and just try it, because one of the great things about the age we live in is that there are no rules. There are rules in terms of like, if you want to make it sound nice, we suggest you do this, but there aren't, that's a piano, that's a harp, that's a guitar, that's a trumpet. You can make it your own instrument, and that's what's really cool about the age I think we live in with music, because you've got those abilities and you can make it your own. So I think if anybody's watching or does watch this back and thinks, I'd like to do something with music, I'd just say go for it, because the minute somebody tells you that you're wrong, that's not you being wrong, that's their interpretation of what you're doing is wrong. So as long as you're confident in yourself, go for it and enjoy it, because it's really cool and you can do all sorts of different stuff. It's amazing that I can play the piano and Stephanie can play the piano, and it sounds completely different, even though the same set of keys are, it's the same instrument. And I know that I can't make it sound like you do, because you play beautifully, but there have been quite a few occasions where I've put a piece of music down and I've bashed my way through it, and then Stephanie's come along and played it, and I'm going, that's how it should go, and come back to it. So I just think go for it, just be open and whack it. You were saying to me that you start off with some of your pupils and you get them sometimes to smack the keys. I think that's
it's to make it fun, because like all the books start with this is middle C, and I mean, like when I went to my first piano lesson, I was a bit of a freak, and I'd already taught myself to read music. And I think I was 9 when I started the piano, and I could read music. And my piano teacher sat me down at the piano, and he put open a book, and he was like, "So what's this note?" And I was like, "Well, that's middle C." He's like, "What's that note?" I was like, "Well, that's A." He's like, "Well, you put your fingers like this." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I can play that. That's not a problem." He's like, "What about the left hand?" I was like, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I can play that. Oh, yeah, I can play that together." So I never did the "this is middle C" bit. I just, for some reason, could just do it. But all the books start with this is middle C. Then you go to D with your right hand, and you go to B with your left hand. So you've got 3 notes. If you're quick at it, and that's really boring. That's so boring. So you have to. I don't want them to feel disheartened, in their first lesson. So I encourage that improvisation. Maybe we'll hit out some rhythms, and I've got drums as well, and we try different things, so it's just not it's not soul destroying.
I had that in my head. I had that in my head this evening. I was so tempted to start smacking the top of the lid of the piano, and then realised that all the microphones would fall off, and Toby would have a right go because we spent an hour setting it up. It did cross my mind.
Yeah, you can do anything, kids. You can hammers, whatnot.
Dead fish.
Dead fish. Well, on that note, everyone, I think we'll call it a night. But yeah, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, everyone who was watching, everyone who liked and commented and shared. If you would like to see what we've got coming up in the next few months, make sure to follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we are on Instagram, and we are on YouTube. I'm glad I got my hand the right way around. But yes, so we've got some exciting things in the pipeline. We're currently exploring the connection between music, nature, and well-being. So we've got some interesting experiments and performances coming up, as well as some documentary style programs. So make sure to like and follow our pages, and yeah, keep in touch. And yeah, thank you once again, and we'll see you soon.